Sometimes things take a turn for the worse, don't they? And things go wrong. And in those situations, you think, oh, what's going on here? What's God doing? What's going on in my life? And Stacey, she had a moment like that. She's on a certain benefit and it changed, which meant she had lots of problems with paying her bills and working out her situation. But you know what? That bad has turned for good. When that happened, she was living with her mum in her house, but now she's got her own flat. And that's not directly linked to the benefits. But also, the benefit she changed onto meant she could get her teeth done, and now she's working on a Saturday. She's got a Saturday job. So it looked really bad, didn't it? And she was upset about that. But actually, something changed. There was more than meets the eye in that situation. And for me, I lived on my own for a year, and it was a bad situation because I didn't think it was going to come about. I was living with a guy for 2 years, and then they didn't renew his visa. So I was like, oh God, what are you doing in this situation? Because living on my own, I found that hard work, really. I started to go a little bit crazy. It was a strange time. But through that year-long time I had to live on my own, God has given me an empathy and understanding what it is to live on your own and what it is to deal with some sort of loneliness. So even though it was like a bad situation, there was more that meets the eye to it, and it changed. So Jesus on the cross, okay, and he's praying, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. But it seems strange that he even says Father. Why would he say Father? What's happening on the cross here is God's pouring out his wrath on sin, isn't he? Jesus here is sin in our place, and God is pouring out his anger upon that sin. So his wrath is upon Jesus, and it's right at the end, it's his last saying, all that is left for Jesus to do is literally just to die. So he says, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. But he still calls him Father in the worst of times. This is the worst time in Jesus' ministry, isn't it? It looks bleak, doesn't it? The hands of evil literally have their hands around Jesus' neck, and they're wringing it. And evil is doing its worst on Jesus. In the worst of times, Jesus still says, Father. And the first saying we had was what? Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. Then we have all these other sayings, and then the last saying is, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. So we see that even in the sandwich that Jesus meets and deals with God's wrath, but here we see a sort of picture of that relationship being restored in Jesus and his Father. So it's the same for you, isn't it? If your situation seems bleak, or whatever situation you might find in it, you can still cry, Father. You can still, however bad your situation is, you don't look to me like you're nailed to a cross about to die. So we've got some more hope really than Jesus' situation looks like. And you, in your bad situation, whatever that might look like, or whatever that might entail, you can still relate to God as Father. You can know him as Father. I know some people say, it's hard for me to relate to God as Father because I didn't have a good relationship with my Father. And things like that. But the reality is, the Bible says that God has put a spirit in you of sonship. So the spirit that God has put in you, enables you to relate to God as Father. And you know what? God is the person who has to be the Father, not you. So God can be a Father to you still, even whatever history you might have had. And he's put a spirit in you to relate to him as Father. So you can enjoy the benefits of God being your Father, whoever your earthly father has been. But sometimes it doesn't look like that, does it? Sometimes you don't feel the presence of God. Sometimes a situation doesn't look like God is in it at all. And there's a little story about someone you'll know. You maybe ask me who he is later, but I haven't asked for permission to use this illustration. But he's bald, so you might know who he is. But I just want to say on the camera. Anyway, and he told me a story, and it was in a group situation. Yeah, you nodded, you might know who it is. And he's no longer with the church. He left a little while ago, 2 months ago. Anyway, so he told me this situation when he first got dropped off at school. He remembers crying, and he remembers being really distraught because he'd been left from his mother. And you know what? In that situation, he was left there. It was probably a horrendous situation for him. But do you think his mother, he's been with his mother's nurtured him, taught him to walk and talk and all those things, and now here he is dropped off at the school gate. Do you think his mother cared for him in that situation? Yeah. We don't know his mother, but some of us do. Did his mother care for him and love him and want the best for him in that situation? Yeah. It's probably true, so we don't know totally the situation. We'll probably say that is true. But for him, as he's there in his uniform, at the school gate, being left, it would be scary, wouldn't it? Think all these strangers, it would be a really bad situation. But do you know what? Over time, that will improve. His eyes at the moment when he saw that, he just wanted to cry and go back to his mum, wouldn't he? But actually there was more to meet the eyes of that situation, more than just the reality of the people, the scary people. Because those scary people around him, they would become his friends who would be better at playing with him than his mother ever could be, wouldn't they? And you know, amongst those peers, he's going to find a wife, which he would never find just with his mum, would he? So even though it's a horrendous step he had to take, for in his eyes, there was some good, wasn't there? Some good coming out of it. So, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Is that we can still know, in the beliefs of times, we can still know God as a loving Father. And it says, into your hands. This is sort of, there's a sort of parallel going on here. Because when Jesus hands over to be crucified, it reads this in Luke. The Son of Man must be delivered over to the hands of sinners, be crucified. And now it says at the end of that, so he's been handed over to sinful men, to evil, in Luke 24 it tells us. But now we have the picture of Jesus handing his spirit back to God the Father, but in his hands. Jesus' life and Jesus' death. Okay, so the picture here of Jesus' death saying, into your hands I put my spirit, is a picture of his life. Okay? So at the end he says, into your hands I put my spirit. But that's exactly what he did in his whole life, really. He said, I only do what I see the Father doing. I only say what the Father tells me to say. He committed his whole life to the Father, and in fact, his death too. And on the cross, Jesus is trusting his Father, isn't he? He's trusting his hands, his life, in the hands of God. He says, when he prays about this thing of the cross he's got to do, he's in the Garden of Gethsemane, he says, not my will, but your will be done. He's trusting God the Father in what he's doing. He's placed himself into his hands. It's a picture of trust. On the cross, Jesus was mocked, wasn't he? And what people said to Jesus is, go on, save yourself. God, if you really are the Son of God, get down. And they sort of when they put a plaque above him about him being the King of the Jews, people said, no, let him say he said he was the King. He's no king at all, really. So Jesus was mocked in that situation. But what was the spiritual reality of the cross and that experience? The spiritual reality is that at that time he was winning the praise of men, wasn't he? What was he experiencing? He was experiencing the mockery and the hatred of men, but the spiritual reality of the situation was he was winning the praises of men. Do you see the sort of like the parallel that's going on there? And for us in our lives, there can be sometimes such a parallel. But the things that our eyes see, the spiritual reality can be the total opposite of what's actually going on. For Jesus, though, as he's being mocked, he might have a sense of things that are falling apart. And sometimes we have a sense of things falling apart. For some of us, you might think this church is falling apart. And it looks like it, doesn't it? It says bits are breaking off, aren't they? And you think that, well, maybe it's never going to survive and things like that. And it's true, isn't it? But that might not be the spiritual reality of the church. It looks like it. But you know what? We might be being much more effective than we were 5 years ago. Because we can only see what with our eyes, can't we? When we think about it from a human perspective. But the spiritual reality of the situation will be so much more than meets our eyes. So when we get to those situations, when we think things are falling apart, what's the temptation? The temptation often is to do it our own way, isn't it? Not to carry on with God's will in the situation, or what God would have us do, but maybe try and fix it ourselves, try and sort it ourselves. Maybe it might be a personal situation, it might be a job situation, it might be a relationship situation, it might be something to do with your body, physically falling apart. And we can be in those situations. But in those situations, there can be more than meets the eye of those situations. It might not just be the thing we're experiencing that's going on. Jesus entrusted his whole life, didn't he, to God. And even though parts will look like, oh, here comes a cat. See, it's probably a picture of spiritual evil. Oh, Janet's not here. She'll be very offended if we talk about cats in an evil way. Okay. You like cats? Okay, the cat's got it. Okay, so I've done quite a bit of youth work in my time, and I reflect on youth work, and youth work, it's really pointless, doesn't it? because they're horrible and they're rude to you, and they don't listen, and it's hard work. You know, it's just, in some ways, it's just really, I say, what's the point of doing youth work? Horrible young people, being horrible, no one becomes a Christian. But then Jess, that's how actually Jess got in contact with the church. Sorry, she's coming, she's coming and you think, and there's a big gap, and you can fall in that gap and think, that youth work is all pointless, why did Eric ever bother? But in fact, we don't know what's going on, do we? There's more than meets the eye, there's a spiritual reality that's happening. We need to trust in God, we need to have faith. You know, having faith in a situation is the safest place to be in. In a situation, going into that situation with faith and doing what you think God would have you do in that situation is the safest thing you can do. When trouble hits and when things are like they're falling apart, it's easy to think the safest thing to do is grab a hold of it and let's try and work it out somehow. But that's not the safest thing. Because then the safest thing for Jesus would have been to call angels down, wouldn't it? To get down the cross and go, ha ha, look, I am God to everyone. But that wouldn't have won our salvation. That wouldn't have made us heirs of the kingdom to come. And he wouldn't have received praise for him, would it? Only in that second. But he's going to get everlasting praise. So the safest place to us is to follow. We know we get things wrong, but in the best way that we think God is guiding us and leading us through his word, to follow him and take steps of faith is the safest place for you to be. So he said, Father, didn't he? Then into your hands. So we've looked at knowing God as Father, and we've looked at trusting him, being in his hands, and we're going to finish with looking at he committed his spirit to God. And here sometimes in our culture we're like, what's this all about? Jesus committed his spirit? What's that all about? There is a debate, and there's a debate within, might be wider than Christianity possibly, but how many parts we're made up of. Everybody, most people agree that we're made up of a body, yeah? Made up of a body. Some people even think that's like, whoa, let's not go there. So we're made up of a body. But someone said we're a body, but also we've got a spirit, yeah? So some essence in us is the bit that is you, that makes you you. But other people say that we've got, a spirit and a soul. And the Bible does talk about soul and spirit, but it gets very confused, doesn't it, if you have a debate if it's 2 parts or 3 parts. So we're not going to get into that. But the Bible definitely is clear that we're made of a body, and there is a spiritual dimension to us. We are not just physical beings, we're also spiritual beings. So when Jesus' body dies and he goes to the tomb, his spirit continues, yeah? His spirit carries on, lives. But the world says to us quite often that you are just a body. You are just physical. So you know what? If you change your hairstyle, you change yourself. If you change your clothes, you've changed yourself. If you change your boyfriend, you've changed yourself. Change things and you are changed. That's what adverts seem to say, don't they? Hey, you're in a bad situation. Buy me, buy this product. You'll be better. That's the story of nearly every advert. But the reality is, it doesn't make any difference, except for making you poorer. It doesn't change the situation, it doesn't change you. You are a spiritual being. You're not just a physical being this morning, you are a spiritual being. And because you're a physical being and a spiritual being, it means if I kicked you, nice Colin, if I kicked you, it'll hurt and you feel physical pain. But you know also, if you lie, if you gossip, if you lust, it will hurt you. We understand the physical pain, yeah? Because it's instant, isn't it? And depending on who does it, how severe it is and all that. Kick hurts, punch hurts, nipple cripple, all that hurts. And I looked at Ruben when I said that. He was squinting at me with one eye. So physical pain we all understand, don't we? But we don't so clearly see. When we tell a lie, we don't get a cripple in the nipple, do we? And we don't get a punch in the face. Well, sometimes when we tell a lie to some people, we might get a punch in the face. But it doesn't work that instant way. But it's hurting you. Spiritually, it's hurting you. And you get dead into it. Like a boxer, they make them, when they have lots of boxing, they get like a tough chin, don't they? Your spirit hardens itself. And God talks about the heart as well, how it goes like a stone. And when you lie, and when you continue to lie and lust and gossip, not saying that there are only 3 sins out there, but those, they hurt you. But a lot of you are battle weary, you've got hard chins, and you don't feel the pain. And you cry, and sometimes you don't know why you're crying. and you hurt, and sometimes you don't know why you're hurt. But the world has said, do what you want, as long as it doesn't hurt yourself. But the world doesn't know that the things you do hurt you. The gossip you tell about another person hurts your spirit, hurts your essence, what makes you you. Makes you a gossiper, doesn't it? The lies you tell make you a liar. And the lust you have makes you a fornicator or an adulterer. It affects you. It affects you. You might not feel the pain straight away, but it will bring about pain. It's a sad truth. And you know what? The world's so good at telling the lie, isn't it? The world's so good to say, you're a physical body. You know, the things that go off in your mind don't hurt anyone. Especially don't hurt you. It just makes it good for you to work out things in your own mind. It's a sad truth that our children are growing up saying, we're just bodies, do what you like with it. Please yourself. Please yourself means hurt yourself. Because we don't know what's good for us, really, do we? We end up hurting ourselves. Piling pain upon ourselves. So we need to be aware. The world is good at saying, eat 5 fruit and veg. We're not so good at morality, are we? Morality is good for you. Doing things that God has created you to do is good for you. It's like God set about creation, He set about a framework which is good for you to live in. When we walk outside of that, we begin to hurt ourselves. And like when you get a car brand new, it's all good when you drive it off the forecourt, isn't it? The car works. But you know, if you never service it, if you never take it for an MOT, you never fix any of the problems going, you don't do anything the way it's meant to be driven, you just go pedal to the metal, ram on the brakes, it's going to crash in the end and it'll break down. That's what our lives are like. We need to live in step with God. We need to take care of our spiritual beings, our spiritual selves. We need to take care of ourselves, not just taking care of our physical bodies. Jesus was a spiritual man. Jesus was spiritually alive. He came with a spiritual conscience that some of us have become deadened to. He was a spiritual man. And he was a spiritual man, and he came with a physical body, didn't he? But he was a spiritual man. Like us, we've got physical bodies and we're spiritual men. We are like Jesus in that way. But Jesus came spiritually alive, where we often are spiritually dead. So what we do is we look around at the world, and what meets our eyes is the truth. We see what we see, and then we make decisions and choices, and we live as we live according to what we see. And that is folly. That is stupidity. Do you know what? The blind person knows people better and sees people better than you do. I don't know if you've ever reflected upon it. But you think, well, having one sense gone would make it harder. Do you know what? It improves it in one area. A blind person doesn't see how attractive you are. A blind person doesn't see how big you are. A blind person doesn't see how scary you are or how short you are. A blind person knows more about you than you do sometimes. Because they relate to you not by their eyes, but only their other senses. And do you know what? That gives them a better perspective on really what you're like than the people who see you. And that's a bit what it's like with the spiritual dimension of our world. We think we've seen it all, we think we've got it sewn up, we think we know what's going on, don't we? But we don't. We don't know what's going on. We don't know what's best. We don't know what people are like. We don't know what you are like, or I am like. We're spiritually blinded in this world often. It's like we're living as though what we see is a reality, and that's how best to please us is how best to please us. And what we should do is what we should do. We throw that saying out, there's more than meets the eye, as though it would help us. But it's true. The world's not just physical. The Bible says that our battles aren't against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers in the spiritual realm. So when Jesus came, he came as a spiritual man and he taught spiritual truths. He said, turn the other cheek. I mean, physically that sounds stupid, doesn't it? Let someone punch you and punch you again. And go the extra mile. When you're helping someone, just don't help them here, help them further. When they ask for your shirt, give them also your tunic and go the extra mile. He came and he said, I am the good shepherd, I am the door, I am the bread of life. I am the gate. All these things seem random, don't they? Talk about physical objects, but no, there's a spiritual dimension. And he saw spiritual realities, didn't he? He asked questions that, when I return, will I find faith on earth? He saw the faithlessness. And he says, I know who you're like. You're like your Father, who's the Father of lies. And he said to people, if your hand causes you to sin, better you to chop it off than go to heaven with your arm. He saw spiritual realities, and he spoke into our physical world with spiritual truth as well as physical truth. Jesus trusted his life, didn't he? And he trusted his death into the Father's hands. And he gave himself, he trusted himself into God, so that we can entrust our spirits to God's hands. Yeah? So that when we come to the end of our days, we can say, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. So that we're not going to, our physical body's going to die, one day it'll change, won't it, in the new heavens and new earth, but we're returning to God. And lots of us are happy with the idea of giving our death, our final minutes to God. We'll think at the end, if I say, Father, into your hands, I'm going to give you my spirit, I'm going to go to you, God. There's a sense of peace, isn't there, that in the end we're going to God. But are you happy with committing and entrusting your spirit to God today? Jesus, it wasn't just his death that he entrusted to God, it was his life. Would you be happy to entrust your life to God? Entrust your life to Jesus. As we come to a conclusion, the last couple of things. As we look at this message, what would the end line, what would sin be saying to us? What would sin say to us in this message? Sin would say, trust what you see, live for now. Trust what you see, live for now. God would say, see me, trust me.